It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Do you know did you mention what Spiva stands for?
I didn't get the acronym because I didn't write it. In my haste of show preparation, I didn't write. Tell them what the
It's
acronym
the
is.
S&P indices versus active management. So their whole entire study is laid out that way. How do the indices perform relative to the active managers?
And they update this consistently. It's a great place to go look at data and process it. So let's go through some of these actual asset classes. I thought this would be interesting for everybody. Large cap. Large cap's interesting because that's the S&P 500. The percentage of funds meaning active managers that underperform the benchmark, meaning the S&P 500 on large cap, 5-year, 76.49%.
So 3/4 of active fund managers underperformed just buying the benchmark over a 5-year period.
If you think that that's just a fluke, that 5-year that's probably different. If you look at the 3-year, it's close to 79%. I guess we could say over the last year, back as of June 30th. Now I'm sure it's got blown up with December. It was 63%, but still, I always like looking at the 5-year data.
Sure,
because it's a little longer, a little more knowledge there in time past. Small cap value, small cap value. I will tell you, this one kind of shocked me because forever I was buying the S&P 500, and anybody who's been a client for mine for over a decade knows that I've always loved index investing because of, and I'll get into the benefits in a minute, but I always felt like that was an efficient marketplace. Yep. Small cap I considered somewhat inefficient because you had all these different small companies, and unless they were in your neck of the woods, you wouldn't know about them. But guys, the data has changed on this. Small cap value, if you look at the 5-year, 100% of active managers underperformed the benchmark.
So in this study, there was not one single small cap value active manager that performed better than the S&P small cap 600 value.
Exactly.
That's
according to Spiva. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And this is one, I'm telling you, if you'd asked Brian Preston 10 years ago, I would have said, no, go buy the S&P 500 on large cap. But that's an efficient marketplace. But in that inefficient marketplace, like small cap or international,
that's where you should buy.
Go buy an active manager because they can still probably get you some alpha there. The data is not showing that anymore. Let's transition to bonds. Bonds, Bo, you like this because you did. I can tell you being a CFA, it probably scares you. It scares me a little bit when everything is done not by. You can't outsmart it.
Analytics and calculation.
You like to think, especially when you get a CFA and all these things, and you see people, you might have seen on YouTube, some of the commercials I've noticed on our YouTube channel are people out there pushing these trading strategies and all this stuff. And I'm like, it makes you, as humans, we want to think we're smarter than just going along to get along with the system.
Right.
But the data doesn't always support that. But I give you a little reprieve with bonds. Because investment grade short-term bonds, because who wants to be buying mid-term or long-term, intermediate or long-term bonds in a rising interest rate environment, 5-year average, 40%.
So the majority of active managers actually outperformed the investment grade indices.
That makes sense, though. I always like to apply a little common sense. When I talk about taxes or when I talk about investing, I like to apply common sense to it. The government, with the quantitative easing, distorted so much of the bond marketplace with treasuries. I mean, they were just so many treasury bills were being purchased. It makes sense that the indices were kind of skewed a little bit.
Yeah, and when you think about it, at least my perception of the fixed income marketplace is when we were in a declining interest rate environment, really since like the late 1970s, it wasn't really hard to make money on bonds because it's like a seesaw. When interest rates go down, the value of bonds go up and vice versa. So as interest rates have been going down, it used to be really easy. You could just go buy a total bond market index and it would perform pretty well for you. Now that we're entering into a rising rate environment and nobody knows the speed at which rates are going to change or if they're going to continue moving in the same direction, I do think that there are individuals out there who can navigate that marketplace better than just the market cap weighted index. Justin, that one was for you. I had a guy on here.
Well, there is one where the Spiva data shows that the index still does better. And this makes sense. Government short-term fixed income, because remember the other one, investment grade means these are private companies. This is going and buying corporate bonds and so forth. But government short-term, the 5-year average is 58.62% of active managers underperform the indices.
Yep.
So that's interesting. And then let's go ahead and let's shift over to international, because I told you this is something I've had to shift my mindset on in the last 5 to 7 years. Is that, and listen to this, and I just took this right from the Spiva research, over the 1, 3, 5, 10, and 15-year investment horizon, so they encompassed it all, managers across all international equity categories underperformed their benchmarks. Furthermore, the longer the time horizon in general, the more funds underperform.
That's right. But I can hear people already saying, yeah, but that's not. But there were some funds that outperformed. I mean, everyone other than that small cap when it wasn't 100%. So all I have to do is be able to find those funds that outperform. And yeah, that's true. But that's a really difficult exercise over the long term, because you might be able to pick a fund that does really well this year, but do you have confidence that that's going to be the same fund company or fund manager that's going to do well the next year and the following and the following? So when you're designing a portfolio and building out your individual pieces, you kind of have to think through that. While you may get lucky once,
right,
is it likely that same manager is going to have the same track record moving forward?
And I think you have to be careful. It's when you get into the data, there's also what's called survivorship bias. Is that we all got to go look at some of these funds, and there are some really great long-term active management funds. But here's the dirty little secret of active management: is that over 5 to 7 years, underperforming funds get merged into better performing funds, so that the long-term good performance kind of gets bolstered. That's even right. For the laggards. The laggards just kind of disappear. It's that survivorship bias that you have to be careful when you're reviewing the statistics of active versus the index funds.